Do you know who I am? Do you know who I am?
That.
What'd you say?
I did this to feel like my own person. I think they're cool. And the way I look at it is, it's my body and I can do.
George O. Gore II just exposed the dark truth behind My Wife and Kids. From a child prodigy with Hollywood in the palm of his hand, to quietly disappearing after the cameras stopped rolling. George O. Gore's story isn't just about fame. It's about frustration, betrayal, and silence.
It's the business of rejection. You hear no 100 times more than you hear yes.
So why did George vanish? And how did a breakout star from one of TV's most beloved black sitcoms end up broke, boxed in, and blacklisted? Let's go back to the beginning.
4 years old at this point, and I have a solo interview with a grown-up, and apparently I was impressive enough, and that got me started in my career.
Before he ever played Junior Kyle on My Wife and Kids, George O. Gore was already a Hollywood veteran. By the time he was 17, he'd done everything, from starring as young Brian in Juice with Tupac to breaking hearts on New York Undercover. He was the kid who could deliver comedy, drama, and charm, all before he was old enough to vote. When ABC tapped him for My Wife and Kids in 2001, they weren't taking a gamble. They were investing in a proven talent. Gore stepped into the role of Michael Kyle Jr., the lovable, goofy, often clueless teen son of Damon Wayans and Tisha Campbell. The chemistry was instant, and so were the laughs. Audiences couldn't get enough. George's timing, his expressive face, the way he played dumb with precision. It wasn't just funny, it was unforgettable. He earned 3 NAACP Image Award nominations. But behind the cameras, things weren't nearly as smooth. George was young, black, and funny. But Hollywood still didn't know what to do with that combination, especially when he started asking for more. By season 4, George wanted to direct, not just act. He'd been watching, learning, and building his skills from the inside. And when he finally got his shot with the episode Outbreak, he proved he had more to offer than punchlines.
The first time I directed.
You directed?
Yeah, I directed 2 episodes, yeah.
But success behind the camera came at a cost. The moment George stepped into a leadership role, the energy on set shifted. According to whispers from production insiders, producers began having closed-door conversations about cutting him loose. Jealousy started bubbling, not just from crew, but from cast members too. Some didn't like being directed by their co-star, especially one younger than them. It didn't help that George was frustrated with the role he was stuck in. Junior had become a punchline, always dumb, always the clown. Gore wanted to evolve. He had range, he had ambition, but the showrunners weren't interested in letting him grow.
You know, it's the business of rejection. You hear no 100 times more than you hear yes.
That tension between what George could do and what they let him do started to wear him down. The same network that had once seen him as the future now saw him as a risk. By the end of season 5, Gore's excitement had faded. The producers? They were already pulling away. Worse, his paycheck didn't reflect his impact. Despite carrying major comic weight on the show and directing episodes, George was reportedly underpaid compared to co-stars. The Wayans family? Making money off residuals to this day. George? Barely mentioned. No bonuses, no big payouts, just silence. On the surface, My Wife and Kids looked like a dream job. But to George, it was a golden cage, full of potential but no freedom. He was being boxed into a role that made the world laugh, but made him feel invisible. And that's when the isolation began. No one backed him when things got tense. Not the producers, not ABC, and not even some of his castmates. Especially when one of them was also his love interest in real life. Because when Brooklyn Sudano walked away, it wasn't just a breakup, it was a warning shot. And for George, it marked the beginning of the end. When George O. Gore and Brooklyn Sudano shared the screen as Junior and Vanessa, the chemistry wasn't just acting, it was real. Off camera, the two had quietly started dating. Fans were obsessed. Their connection added a layer of authenticity to the show's comedy and heart. But behind the scenes, that same romance would become one of the most painful chapters in George's career. Brooklyn wasn't just any co-star. She was the daughter of disco legend Donna Summer. She had her own pedigree, her own path, and her own pressures. And according to insiders, when George started butting heads with producers, Brooklyn faced a decision: stand by her man or protect her rising career. The tension around George's directorial ambitions and creative frustrations were already stirring resentment. But when Brooklyn appeared to take his side in private discussions, things escalated. Producers reportedly began icing her out too, limiting her screen time, rewriting lines, and pushing her out of the spotlight she was just starting to step into. Brooklyn saw the writing on the wall, and when the series ended in 2005, she didn't look back. She moved on, professionally and personally. For George, the breakup wasn't just heartbreak, it was confirmation. Even the person who knew him best, who knew how hard he'd fought, how disrespected he felt, even she chose safety over solidarity. It hurt, and it haunted him. From the outside, their split seemed like just another celebrity couple drifting apart. But fans who paid attention saw something deeper. Sudano's career soared in the years after. George's? It evaporated. She landed major roles in shows like Taken and Cruel Summer. He vanished. And it wasn't because he lacked talent. It was because he'd become a liability in Hollywood, a young black actor who had dared to challenge the status quo, to ask for more than jokes and applause. Insiders say George never really recovered from the fallout with Brooklyn. She had been his anchor during the chaos of My Wife and Kids. And once she was gone, the industry felt colder than ever. There's also speculation, and this has quietly circulated in industry circles, that part of Brooklyn's decision to walk away came from pressure. Some producers allegedly warned her that her association with George could taint her trajectory. Whether or not that's true, the outcome speaks volumes. And things got even more complicated when word got out that George may have clashed with Tisha Campbell too, his on-screen mom. Rumors of arguments, sharp criticisms, and on-set tension between the two added another layer to George's emotional exhaustion. And without Brooklyn by his side, the set felt more hostile than ever. George, once the breakout star of a hit sitcom, suddenly found himself surrounded by people who didn't believe in him anymore, or at least pretended not to. The love was gone, the laughs were forced, the support system dismantled. So, he disappeared. Not because he gave up, but because the world around him made it clear he wasn't welcome anymore. And the saddest part? He never even got a proper send-off. Because just like George's career, My Wife and Kids was yanked from the air, without warning, without closure, and with one final insult that would sting for years to come.
It doesn't matter anymore, Michael.
Why not?
Those were the final words of My Wife and Kids. Jay's surprise pregnancy, a stunned reaction from Michael, and then cut to black. It wasn't just a cliffhanger, it was a trapdoor. No next episode, no season 6, no explanation, just silence. ABC canceled My Wife and Kids in May 2005. One minute it was a primetime staple with millions of loyal viewers. The next, it was gone. And for Damon Wayans, the creator and star of the show, the news hit hard. He admitted he was still ticked off about the cancellation. Not just because the show was over, but because of how it was done. There was no final season, no warning. The cast and crew had no idea the pregnancy reveal would be their last scene together. Behind closed doors, Damon had assumed they were coming back. That's why season 5 ended with a game-changing twist. He believed ABC had already agreed to a renewal and had written the finale under that assumption. But network executives had other plans. Instead of greenlighting My Wife and Kids season 6, ABC handed their Tuesday night slot to According to Jim, a safer, cheaper, more generic comedy. According to Wayans, this was part of a broader trend: networks dumping scripted black family comedies in favor of white-led sitcoms and reality TV. He didn't cry racism. He called it what he believed it really was, a corporate agenda. The sting wasn't just about being canceled. It was about being discarded. A black-led family sitcom that promoted responsible parenting, complex black characters, and comedy with heart, thrown out without dignity and without a proper goodbye. For the fans, the unresolved ending felt personal. They had grown with the Kyle family. They had seen Junior mature, well, sort of, watched Claire evolve and rooted for Michael and Jay's chaotic but sweet love story. And then, nothing. There was no reunion, no special, no one last episode. Just Jay's pregnancy and a door slammed shut. And George Gore, he got no answers either. After years of hard work, loyalty, and creative input, he found out about the cancellation like everyone else, after the fact. With no warning, no final table read, and no chance to prepare for what came next, George, and many others on the show, were left stranded. But while Damon Wayans channeled his bitterness into his next project, The Underground, George had nowhere to go. No new series, no spin-off, no career safety net. Just a young actor with immense talent, and an industry that had already moved on. To this day, fans still beg for a reboot or a proper ending. Damon has said he's open to it. But George? He hasn't said much, because that ending wasn't just the end of a sitcom. For him, it was the end of an era and the beginning of a long, painful silence. But not everyone stayed silent, because when my wife and kids went off the air, some long simmering resentments behind the scenes started spilling into the open. And not all of them had to do with networks. Some came from right inside the house.
Something. And why are you going through my stuff anyway?
Because it was dirty, and I'll stop going through your stuff if you want to do your own laundry.
Nah, that's okay.
On screen, they were one of TV's funniest mother-son duos. Tisha Campbell played Jay Kyle, dramatic, snarky, and fiercely protective. George Gore was her teenage son, Junior, goofy, naive, and constantly getting roasted. Their dynamic was part of what made my wife and kids so special. But off-screen, that chemistry came at a price. According to multiple set insiders, George and Tisha clashed more than once during the show's 5-season run. Tisha, a veteran actress who came up through House Party and Martin, wasn't afraid to speak her mind. And when George's delivery or timing wasn't landing, she didn't wait for a director to say something. She said it herself, right there, in front of everyone. To some, it looked like mentorship. To others, it felt more like micromanagement. George, who had been acting since childhood, wasn't new to the game. And by season 3, he had grown confident in his comedic instincts. So when Tisha corrected or critiqued him mid-scene, he didn't always take it lightly. Rather than stay quiet, George pushed back. Not loudly, not dramatically, but pointedly. At one point, he allegedly called Tisha's acting tired and her approach old school. For a sitcom built around rhythm and timing, that kind of tension didn't go unnoticed. And this wasn't just a generational clash. It was about power. Tisha was already a star, someone with clout. George was rising fast, but he didn't have the same protections. Any disagreement between them could only end one way, and George knew it. That's probably why he never aired it publicly. No tabloid quotes, no social media rants. But according to sources from the production team, their back and forth became a regular feature, sometimes subtle, sometimes sharp. Enough that writers even began adjusting their scenes to limit confrontation. But while George was holding his ground, Tisha was still winning the war. Her experience, her popularity, and her standing with ABC gave her leverage. George? He was boxed into his character, the joke teller, not the shot caller. And when the opportunity came for George to direct episodes, which should have been a moment of celebration, tensions reportedly flared again. Tisha allegedly questioned whether he was ready to lead a cast, especially when some scenes involved her. It was subtle, but the message was clear: stay in your lane. Over time, those little moments added up. A missed cue, a public correction, a look between takes. George began to withdraw, focusing more on directing than acting. Some say his performance in the final season felt flatter, more distant. Not because he lost his touch, but because he lost his joy. And yet, none of this ever made the tabloids. That's part of what made it so strange. George wasn't messy. He didn't do exposés or drama. Even now, his interviews are measured, polite, and vague. But if you listen closely and read between the lines, the story tells itself. It's not easy being the quiet one in a loud industry, especially when you're young, talented, and surrounded by older stars who think they know better. George tried to carve out space for himself, to direct, to grow, to be seen. But instead, he found himself silenced. The emotional wear and tear didn't end with the show's cancellation, because once the lights went down, George still had one more Hollywood lesson to learn. Sometimes the people who love you on screen won't fight for you off it. And the money? That didn't make things better. In fact, it made things worse. On paper, My Wife and Kids looked like a sitcom success story. It aired on a major network. It got syndication deals. It lived on for years in reruns. But when you start digging into who got paid and who didn't, the cracks start showing. George Gore, who played Junior for all 5 seasons, was at the center of the show. His character drove major plot lines. His comedic delivery made scenes pop. He even stepped up to direct. But when the checks went out, George was reportedly at the bottom of the food chain. I still get checks from that show, real nice ones. That's Damon Wayans, confirming that My Wife and Kids continues to earn him residual income to this day. Damon was the star, yes, but he was also a producer, co-creator, and part of a powerful Hollywood family that knew how to make deals. George? He was just a kid actor, and in the eyes of the network, easily replaceable. Multiple insiders now claim that while George was promised long-term opportunities, he was actually locked into a flat-rate contract early in the show's run. No syndication clause, no creative ownership, just a fixed paycheck that stopped the moment the cameras did. And it's not just about fairness, it's about impact. Fans still quote Junior's lines to this day. His facial expressions are meme material. His scenes carried entire episodes. So how did he end up with nothing? Some blame his lack of aggressive representation. Others say it was systemic. Young black actors often signed contracts without the legal firepower to protect their future income. Either way, by the time George realized the scale of the inequality, it was too late. Meanwhile, other cast members, including Tisha Campbell, were stacking credits, producing deals, and media visibility that helped them stay active long after the show ended. George? He struggled to find work, and that's what makes it sting even more. George wasn't lazy. He wasn't difficult. He was just young and trusting. He believed in the show. He thought hard work would pay off. Instead, he got boxed in, burned out, and left behind. Some sources even say George tried to renegotiate during season 4, especially after directing 2 episodes, but was quietly shut down. The unspoken message, be grateful. In Hollywood, that's how exploitation hides, behind fake smiles and casual dismissal. The resentment didn't stop at the studio gates. Damon Wayans later admitted there were jealousy issues within his own family over residuals from My Wife and Kids. That tells you how serious the money really was. It was enough to split families, ruin friendships, and end careers. George never got a piece of that pie. While others were cashing checks and doing press junkets, he was slowly fading from the public eye, forced to take smaller roles and voiceover gigs just to stay afloat. And maybe that's why he never said anything. Not publicly, not in interviews. Because what was he going to say? That he built something iconic and walked away with nothing? It's not just rejection, it's erasure. And George Gore isn't the first actor to face it, but his story hits harder because we saw the talent, we watched him grow, and we believed he'd be a star forever. Instead, the industry made sure his story ended quietly. But there's one more part of this saga that people don't talk about. A casting shakeup so controversial, it still sparks debate today. The day they replaced Claire. And that, too, changed everything. Jazz Ray Cole was just 12 years old when she was cast. A gifted dancer, charming on screen, and perfectly fit for the bubbly, slightly bratty Claire. But between season 1 and 2, producers decided the character needed to go in a more mature direction, including romantic storylines and a plot involving teen pregnancy. Ray Cole's mother said no. Her mother reportedly pushed back hard when writers introduced a storyline about Claire's friend getting pregnant, arguing it was inappropriate for someone Jazz's age. The conflict created a rift, and just like that, the role was recast. Jennifer Freeman, older and more aligned with the new creative direction, stepped in. Ray Cole quietly exited. In a social media post, she later revealed, "I was 12 years old when I got that job. The producers wanted a different thing. They wanted someone a little bit older. I wasn't ready for that. I ended up going to New York to dance, which was my first passion. I really thank God for that, because I got to grow and travel." On the surface, it was a career pivot, but to longtime viewers, it was a red flag. It wasn't just a character swap. It was a reminder that when it came to power on set, parents and young actors had very little of it. The way Jazz's exit was handled mirrored George Gore's trajectory in eerie ways. Young, talented, but ultimately excluded from long-term decisions. Boxed out, quietly replaced, forgotten. Producers didn't try to fix the optics. They didn't protect Jazz's image or make space for a dignified send-off. They wrote in a joke, moved on, and hoped fans would do the same. And while Jennifer Freeman brought a fresh vibe to the character, and certainly grew into the role, the way it was done left a bitter taste, especially once viewers started noticing a pattern. George, Jazz, even Brooklyn Sudano, all three experienced quiet removals, creative stifling, or off-screen pressure. These weren't isolated cases. They were part of a system that prioritized the show's marketability over the well-being of its young stars. Even more disturbing was how the show's writing shifted after these changes. Romantic storylines became more frequent. Comedic exaggeration replaced heartfelt growth. Claire went from a layered teen to a ditzy stereotype. Junior from awkwardly lovable to cartoonishly dumb. Viewers noticed, critics noticed, and many believed the soul of the show started slipping away. But the saddest part, nobody got closure. Jazz Ray Cole never returned. George Gore never got justice. Brooklyn Sudano never spoke publicly about her exit. The show ended without a reunion, a special, or even a proper thank you to the fans who carried it. And for George, that lack of closure still lingers. He gave his youth to that set, his energy, his best years. He played the fool to make millions laugh. And when he wanted to be taken seriously, they turned off the mic. That's the dark truth about my wife and kids. Behind the laughs and the family-friendly vibe, there were power struggles, disrespect, and dreams cut short. And George, he never got the flowers he deserved. Not from the network, not from the producers, not even from most of the fans. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.